Welcome to The Explainer. The story of the Titanic is so much more than a blockbuster movie. It's a really powerful story about human ambition, about fatal mistakes, and one single night that literally changed the world. So today we're going to dissect the anatomy of this legendary disaster.
We all think we know the story, right? The epic film, the tragic romance, but the real story of how this supposedly invincible ship met its end in the freezing North Atlantic is, well, it's a far more complex and cautionary tale. It's about engineering, human error, and just plain hubris. And to really get our heads around the impact of what happened, we have to start with the staggering human cost. On the night of April 14, 1912, more than 1,500 people lost their lives in that icy water. So, let's dig into how a tragedy of this scale could have ever happened.
Okay, first to understand why the sinking was such a profound shock, we need to look at what the Titanic represented before it became a name synonymous with disaster.
Back in 1912, the RMS Titanic wasn't just another ship, it was a statement. This was the largest and most luxurious vessel ever built, a floating palace that stretched for almost 900 feet. It was really a testament to the power and what everyone thought was the invincibility of the industrial age.
This quote just perfectly captures the attitude of the time. The very man who would go on to command the Titanic on its one and only voyage said this. It's a sentiment that a lot of people shared. The idea that modern engineering had finally conquered the dangers of the sea. This overconfidence, this hubris, is absolutely crucial to the story that follows.
And that confidence, that hubris, well, it led directly to the first in a whole chain of catastrophic failures, the complete mishandling of clear and repeated warnings. So, as the Titanic was steaming west, a whole series of warnings started coming in from other ships. This timeline here shows a growing chorus of caution. We're talking at least 7 different messages, all pointing to a huge, dangerous ice field lying directly in their path. The danger wasn't some big secret, it was being actively broadcast. So the obvious question is, right? With so many clear warnings, why on earth didn't the ship slow down from its cruising speed of nearly 22 knots? Why would they just keep steaming full speed into a known hazard?
Well, the answer lies in this fatal combination of circumstances. For one, the wireless operators were totally overwhelmed. Their system had broken down earlier, so they were dealing with a huge backlog of passenger telegrams. Then, a final crucial warning was tragically dismissed. But the biggest factor was the culture of the time. Speed was king. Ice warnings were often just treated as suggestions, not urgent commands.
And this brings us right to the moment of impact. The story of what really happened when that steel met the ice is actually way more interesting than the popular myth.
So, at 11:39 p.m., the conditions were deceptively dangerous. The sea was perfectly calm, like glass. So calm, in fact, that there were no waves breaking against the iceberg to help make it visible. The night was moonless, and because of some mix-up back in port, the lookouts in the crow's nest didn't have any binoculars. They only saw the iceberg when it was right in front of them.
For decades, the image everyone had was of this colossal, 300-foot gash tearing the ship open. But the reality, which we figured out from modern analysis of the wreck, is way more surprising. The total breach was only about 12 square feet. Just a series of smaller openings that, together, proved fatal.
So what happened? The iceberg didn't rip a hole in the ship. Instead, it delivered this glancing blow below the waterline. The impact actually buckled the steel plates and popped the rivets holding them together. That's what created the series of small openings across 6 of the ship's 16 watertight compartments.
And this right here brilliantly illustrates the fatal design flaw. The Titanic was famously designed to be unsinkable. It could stay afloat with its first 4 compartments completely flooded. But the iceberg breached 6. As those compartments filled, the bow dipped lower, and water just started spilling over the tops of the bulkheads into the next compartment, and then the next, and that sealed the ship's fate.
The ship's builder, Thomas Andrews, was actually on board, and he quickly did the math. He figured the ship had about 2 hours left. Instantly, the crisis shifted from trying to save the ship to trying to save the people.
And now, it was a race against time. On its maiden voyage, the Titanic was carrying an estimated 2,224 passengers and crew members.
But here's the shocking part. The ship was only equipped with enough lifeboats for 1,178 people. That's barely half of everyone on board.
So the crucial point here is that this wasn't really an oversight. It was just a feature of the times.
The safety regulations were completely outdated. They just assumed that lifeboats would only be used to ferry passengers to a nearby rescue ship, not to evacuate everyone all at once. The idea of a huge liner sinking so quickly that help couldn't arrive, it was just unthinkable.
And this critical shortage of lifeboats was made so much worse by a totally disorganized and frantic evacuation. I mean, imagine the deafening roar of steam being vented from the funnels, and so many passengers just didn't believe the ship was actually in danger. It was chaos. And in that confusion, lifeboats were lost half-empty, a fatal error that wasted precious spaces.
At 2:20 in the morning on April 15th, just 2 hours and 40 minutes after hitting the iceberg, the RMS Titanic slipped beneath the waves. But it left behind a legacy that would change maritime safety forever. The RMS Carpathia finally arrived on the scene about an hour and a half after the sinking, pulling 710 survivors from the lifeboats. Over 1,500 people were lost in the freezing water. The sheer scale of preventable deaths caused global outrage. I mean, this disaster was a brutal wake-up call for the entire world, and it led directly to the creation of the first international convention for the safety of life at sea, or SOLAS as it's known.
And SOLAS was a complete overhaul of maritime safety. It mandated lifeboats for every single person on board. It required regular safety drills. It established the International Ice Patrol to track icebergs, and it made a 24-hour radio watch mandatory. These regulations, born from this one tragedy, form the foundation of the safety standards that protect people at sea even today.
And this leaves us with a final thought. The story of the Titanic isn't just history. It's a timeless lesson on the dangers of overconfidence and the catastrophic failure that can happen when we have a blind faith in our own technology. It really makes you wonder, what unsinkable systems might we be taking for granted today?